Have you ever said something meaningful, only to watch it vanish into thin air, as if your words carried no weight at all? You were confident, clear, even respectful. Yet somehow your voice didn't matter. Why does that happen? Sometimes it's not your idea that's weak. It's your language that quietly tells people to dismiss you. You're in a conversation with someone you deeply respect. You finally share your perspective, something worth saying. But the moment your words leave your mouth, the energy changes. They nod politely, give a faint smile, and move on as if you never spoke. Not because your point was wrong, but because the way you expressed it made you forgettable. And here's the harsh truth. Once someone has quietly decided that you're not worth listening to, it's nearly impossible to undo that impression. Most people think confidence is about what you say, about bold statements or persuasive arguments. But real confidence, the kind that commands attention, often comes from what you don't say. Certain phrases, ones that sound perfectly reasonable, can instantly signal weakness, uncertainty, or a lack of conviction. And once those words are spoken, your authority evaporates. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology ever tried to explain it. True strength isn't about impressive language or clever phrasing. It's about removing the habits of speech that quietly sabotage you before your message even lands. This isn't arrogance. It's not about talking over others or rejecting humility. It's about ending the self-sabotage that gives people permission to ignore you. Because the difference between being heard and being dismissed often comes down to a few subtle words. 6, to be exact, that you must eliminate immediately. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same truth applies to how you speak. Stop trying to sound strong while using weak language. Stop filling your sentences with words that diminish your presence. Today, we'll uncover 6 phrases that make you look weak the moment they leave your mouth. Phrase number 3 is one almost everyone uses, usually to sound polite, but it actually tells others you don't believe you deserve their attention. Remove it, and you'll notice people begin to take you seriously almost overnight. So, if you're ready to stop being dismissed and start being heard, make sure you're subscribed, because what follows could permanently change the way people perceive you. Phrase number 1, I think and I feel. The moment you start with those words, you've told everyone your statement is merely opinion, debatable, uncertain, and easily brushed aside. Listen to the difference. I think we should try this approach. Sounds hesitant. We should try this approach. Sounds decisive. Same message. Completely different impact. When you start with I think, you frame your idea as subjective, something open to doubt. And when you say I feel like this might work, you imply your logic is ruled by emotion rather than reason. Both phrases quietly invite others to dismiss you. Epictetus once taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Know your stance, and speak from it clearly. Of course, it's fine to qualify your words when you're genuinely uncertain. But when you hedge every statement, you broadcast one thing loud and clear. You don't believe in your own thoughts. And if you don't believe them, why should anyone else? I once watched this play out during a family dinner a few years ago. We were deciding where to go on vacation. My cousin said, I think maybe we could consider going somewhere warm. I feel like the beach might be nice. Everyone nodded politely and ignored it. 5 minutes later, my aunt said, we have 2 options, mountains or beach. The beach works better for everyone's schedule. Suddenly, everyone agreed. Same suggestion, different energy. That's the invisible power of language. It either commands respect or quietly takes it away. At that dinner, my aunt's statement carried weight because she spoke from reason, not hesitation. My cousin's suggestion came across as uncertainty, but hers sounded like a clear conclusion. His idea faded into the background. Hers became the center of discussion. Why? The difference wasn't experience, age, or authority. It was language. One person asked for their thoughts to be considered. The other presented their thoughts as worth considering. One got brushed aside. The other was taken seriously. Here's what you should do instead. State your position directly. Say, this approach solves the problem because, based on what we're seeing, we should... Here's what makes sense. You're not claiming to know everything. You're showing that you've thought it through. There's a big difference between arrogance and clarity. Now, let's be honest. These phrases, I think, I feel, do have their place. If you're genuinely uncertain, it's fine to say, I think this might work. But I need more data. If it's a personal choice, I feel this color fits better for the design. And if it's emotional honesty, I feel uncomfortable with this decision. Those are specific, honest, and intentional. But outside those rare cases, especially in professional discussions, recommendations or when presenting reasoned conclusions, remove them completely. You've already thought. You've already felt. Now, just speak your conclusion. Don't make people swim through your internal hesitation to reach your point. Because when you stop asking for permission to sound confident, the whole room begins to respond differently. It's not about volume or dominance. It's about signaling certainty. The moment you stop suggesting that your own thinking is optional, you reclaim authority. Starting weak undermines everything that follows. But the second phrase we're about to uncover is even more damaging because it tells people you don't even believe you deserve to ask a question. Phrase number 2. This might be a dumb question, but the instant you say that, you've told everyone in the room that you don't respect your own mind. So why should they? By labeling your own question as dumb, you ensure others treat it that way. It's self-sabotage dressed as humility, a quiet way of saying, please dismiss me gently. The Stoics warned against this kind of self-betrayal. They taught, own your inquiry. Questions are how we learn. There are no dumb questions. Only unexamined assumptions. But when you call your question dumb before even asking it, you've already told everyone not to take you seriously. Socrates built an entire philosophy around asking questions. He never started with, this might be foolish to ask. He simply asked, directly, clearly, and fearlessly, because questions expose truth. Marcus Aurelius constantly examined his own thinking in his private writings. But he did it with strength, not apology. I witnessed this destroy someone's credibility at a workshop 2 years ago. The instructor was explaining a new software system when a participant hesitantly raised her hand. This might be a dumb question, but what if we entered the data differently? The instructor replied kindly, there are no dumb questions. But his tone was reassuring, almost patronizing. The room immediately categorized her as inexperienced. Her idea, which was actually innovative, was brushed aside as beginner confusion. 20 minutes later, another participant asked essentially the same question, but framed it with confidence. Help me understand what would happen if we reversed the data entry sequence. The instructor paused. That's interesting, he said thoughtfully. Let's think through the implications. The room leaned in. They discussed it for 10 minutes. Same question. Completely different reception. One person apologized for thinking. The other owned their curiosity, and that, right there, is the subtle difference between sounding uncertain and sounding intelligent. So what should you say instead? Replace, this might be a dumb question with confidence-driven alternatives like, help me understand. Could you walk me through? What would happen if, or better yet, just ask your question directly, without any apologetic buildup. You're not pretending to be an expert, you're seeking clarity, And that's not weakness. That's how real learning happens. You can acknowledge what you don't know without labeling yourself as unintelligent. Now, these phrases do have a place, but it's smaller than you think. If you're in a room full of experts and genuinely worried your question might show a gap in understanding, you can say something like, "I'm not familiar with this area. Could you explain?" That's honest without being self-deprecating. But the phrase, "this might be dumb," has no place in any professional setting, ever. When you stop apologizing for your curiosity, people start engaging with it. When you stop judging your own question as stupid, others stop judging it that way too. Not because you suddenly became more knowledgeable, but because you stopped giving them permission to dismiss you before you even finished speaking. If you've ever caught yourself saying, "This might be dumb," before asking something, and you're realizing now that it quietly sabotaged your own credibility, comment below, "I stopped apologizing." Those 3 words might give someone else permission to stop shrinking their curiosity too. Apologizing for your thinking makes you easy to dismiss. But the 3rd phrase we're about to reveal is even worse. It doesn't just signal insecurity, it tells people you don't believe you deserve what you're asking for. Phrase number 3. Sorry to bother you, but... The moment you open with that, you've announced that you don't believe you deserve their attention. And the sad truth? You're probably right. Because now, they don't believe it either. Starting a request with an apology for simply existing makes you forgettable, easy to deprioritize, and subtly marks your presence as a nuisance. Sorry to bother you tells others your needs are less important than their time, which might occasionally be true, but saying it aloud instantly places you beneath them. The Stoics understood this deeply. Value doesn't apologize for existing. Legitimate requests don't need preemptive apologies. When you apologize before making a reasonable ask, you're silently telling the other person they're doing you a favor just by acknowledging that you exist. Epictetus taught that dignity and self-respect are inseparable from communication. Owning your needs without shame isn't arrogance, it's integrity. Legitimate requests deserve direct communication. But when you pre-apologize for having needs, you're already positioning yourself beneath consideration. I learned this lesson the hard way 4 years ago with my neighbor. He loved playing loud music late into the night. So one evening I knocked on his door and said, "Hey, sorry to bother you, but would it be possible if it's not too much trouble to turn the music down after 11? He smiled and said, "Sure," but nothing changed. A week later, still the same noise. That's when it hit me. I had given him an excuse not to take me seriously. I had apologized for having a boundary, so the next time, I tried a different approach. The music after 11 is keeping me awake. I needed to stay down after that time. No apology, no "if possible." Just a clear, calm statement of my boundary. He looked surprised, then nodded. "Oh yeah, no problem." And that night the noise stopped. Same neighbor, same request, completely different result. The first time I spoke like I didn't deserve quiet. The second time, I spoke like someone who respected their own peace. That's the difference between sounding polite and sounding powerful. One person was ignored, the other was respected. So what's the difference? It's how they spoke. Here's what to say instead. Be direct. Say exactly what you need. "I need this by Thursday." Quick question. "Can you help with this?" Following up on our last message. No apology. Just clarity. You're not being rude. You're being clear. And there's a massive difference between respecting someone's time and apologizing for taking any of it. Now, to be fair, apologies do have a place. If you're genuinely creating inconvenience, say, Sorry for the short notice. I need this by tomorrow. If you've made a mistake, say, sorry, I missed the deadline. If it's a genuine emergency, say, sorry to interrupt, but this is urgent. Those apologies are appropriate because something real warrants them. But the automatic sorry to bother you that slips out in everyday interactions, that's not humility, it's habit. And it quietly tells people, I don't believe my request deserves attention. You're not bothering anyone. You're communicating. That's what humans do. When you stop apologizing for existing, people stop treating your presence as a disruption. When you stop apologizing for having needs, others stop seeing them as optional. Not because you've become demanding, but because you've stopped giving them permission to ignore you. Apologizing for simply existing makes you easy to overlook. But the next phrase, the fourth one, doesn't just make you sound weak. It makes you sound incompetent. Phrase number 4, I'm no expert, but that one line kills your credibility before your point even begins. When you say it, what people hear is, I'm about to share something, but even I don't trust myself. It's the verbal equivalent of stepping onto a stage and saying, please don't take me too seriously. The Stoics valued truth over ego. If what you're saying is valid, say it. If you're uncertain, learn before you speak. But beginning with I'm no expert gives everyone permission to tune out. Because even you don't stand behind your own words. Marcus Aurelius constantly questioned his own understanding, but in private. When he spoke publicly, he spoke with clarity. He didn't preface his thoughts with disclaimers about what he didn't know. He stated his reasoning directly, acknowledged his limits when needed, and never apologized for having them. I once saw this play out at a neighborhood association meeting 5 years ago. The topic was whether to add speed bumps on our street. A retired engineer raised his hand and said, I'm no expert, but it seems like speed bumps might help with the speeding problem. People nodded politely. The discussion moved on. Here's the irony, he was an expert. He had spent 30 years in traffic engineering, but his disclaimer made everyone treat his point as just another casual opinion. Later in the same meeting, a school teacher, with no background in engineering, said, based on what I've seen in other neighborhoods, speed bumps reduce average speeds by around 15 miles per hour. I looked into this after the last meeting. No disclaimer, no apology. Just clear information, confidently stated. Her suggestion carried weight. The group decided to research speed bumps based on her input, not his. Same recommendation. Completely different outcome. One person disclaimed their credibility. The other owned their insight. So here's what to say instead. Speak from what you actually know. Say, in my experience, what I've observed is, the research shows, or simply state your point directly. You're not claiming to know everything. You're sharing what you do know, and that's legitimate. That's valuable. You can always acknowledge specific gaps in your knowledge without branding yourself as incompetent before you even start. Because confidence doesn't mean pretending to know it all. It means standing behind the truth you already understand. Now, let's be fair. Disclaimers do have limited, specific use. If you're genuinely speaking outside your area of expertise, saying something like, I'm not a lawyer, but from a practical standpoint, or this isn't my field, but you might consider, that's perfectly reasonable. You're acknowledging your boundaries while still contributing value, but saying I'm no expert before every opinion tells people you're just guessing and hoping to sound right. When you stop disqualifying yourself before you even speak, people stop disqualifying your ideas. Not because you suddenly became an expert, but because you stopped telling them that you aren't one. Present what you know. Acknowledge what you don't, but never, ever preemptively announce that nothing you say should be taken seriously. If these phrases have been revealing how your own words have been quietly sabotaging you. If you're realizing that language shapes perception, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because the next phrase is a subtle one, yet it kills your authority before you even finish speaking. Phrase number 5. Does that make sense? At first glance, it seems harmless, polite even. But in truth, ending a statement with "does that make sense" shifts responsibility for understanding from you, the communicator, to them, the listener. It quietly signals that you're not sure you explained yourself clearly, or worse, that you're asking for permission to have made sense. It sounds like you're polling the room for validation that your thoughts are coherent enough to exist. The Stoics never sought that kind of approval. They spoke with clarity, then moved forward. Epictetus taught, "First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. If you've learned it, say it clearly. Then, if needed, confirm understanding. But do it from confidence, not insecurity." The question isn't, "Does that make sense?" The question is there anything you'd like me to clarify? I learned this lesson the hard way about 3 years ago. I was explaining to a close friend why I'd decided to change careers. I laid out my reasoning, my research, my plan, everything. And then I ended with, "Does that make sense?" She paused for a few seconds, then said softly, I guess." That hesitation told me everything. In that moment, my own question had planted doubt, not about my plan, but about me. By asking for validation, I'd accidentally invited uncertainty into a conversation that had been perfectly clear. I wasn't asking if she understood. I was asking if she approved. A year later, I found myself in a similar conversation. Another big decision, another explanation. This time I spoke my reasoning, and then simply stopped talking. No follow-up. No. Does that make sense? Just silence. She thought for a moment, then leaned forward and asked, "What about your health insurance? Have you calculated the income difference?" Those were engagement questions. She wasn't questioning my logic. She was processing it with me. The difference? I hadn't asked her to validate my coherence. I had assumed clarity and invited genuine dialogue instead. Here's what to say instead. What questions do you have? Or what needs clarification? Is anything unclear? Or sometimes, the most powerful option, say nothing. Let silence do the work. You're not questioning your own coherence. You're simply giving others space to think. That's confidence. That's clarity. That's how you respect both their intelligence and your own voice. Now, let's be fair again. Checking understanding does have its place. When explaining something technical, it's okay to ask, "Did I explain that clearly?" That focuses on your delivery, not your competence. Or when teaching, you can ask, "Which part should I go over again?" That's supportive, not insecure, but "Does that make sense?" carries a different energy. It reveals self-doubt disguised as politeness. You think you're being considerate, but you're actually asking for reassurance that you're not confused, and that subtle difference changes everything. One type of language invites genuine engagement. The other quietly invites doubt about whether you even know what you're talking about. When you stop seeking approval for simply having spoken, people begin focusing on what you said, instead of wondering whether it made sense. Your ideas are judged on their merit, not dismissed because you've already told everyone you're unsure about them. Seeking validation for your own thinking makes you sound uncertain. But the final phrase, the sixth one, is even worse. Because it doesn't just signal doubt. It makes you sound like you already believe you're wrong before anyone's even disagreed. Phrase number 6. You're probably right, but... Starting a disagreement by conceding you're probably wrong ensures your actual point gets ignored. That phrase quietly translates to, "I'm about to disagree with you, but I don't believe in my disagreement enough to stand behind it." The Stoics didn't do that. They disagreed when they had reason to disagree, and they did it directly. If you genuinely believe someone is wrong, say so, and explain why. If you don't think they're wrong, then don't disagree. But whatever you do, don't undermine your own counterpoint before you've even made it. Marcus Aurelius welcomed correction when he was mistaken. But when he was confident in his reasoning, he stated his position clearly, without apology or hesitation. He understood something simple yet profound. Disagreement should either be confident or silent. Because weak disagreement is worse than none at all. It suggests you're objecting out of politeness, not conviction. I saw this play out at a family planning meeting 2 years ago. We were discussing how to care for my grandmother as her health declined. My uncle proposed moving her into an assisted living facility. My aunt clearly disagreed, but began with, "You're probably right that assisted living makes sense, but I just wonder if maybe she'd be happier staying at home with some help." The room heard something entirely different. "I know you're right, but my feelings don't really matter." And just like that, her opinion, which was actually valid, got brushed aside with polite nods. The conversation moved forward as if she had agreed. 10 minutes later, my mother spoke up. She didn't hedge, didn't soften, didn't apologize. She simply said, "I see a specific problem with that plan. She told me last week she's terrified of leaving her home. Moving her now while she's still aware would be traumatic. I think we should explore in-home care first." No preconcession. Just, here's the issue, here's why it matters, here's what we should do instead. The room stopped. Everyone reconsidered. By the end of the discussion, the group agreed to research both options seriously because my mother had spoken with conviction, not caution. So here's what to say instead. I see it differently. Here's why. I have concerns about that approach. The data suggests something else. Or simply, state your disagreement clearly, without apologizing for having it. Own your position, or don't voice it at all. Because half-hearted disagreement isn't diplomacy. It's wasted breath. It fills the room with words that even you don't believe in. Now, of course, context matters. If someone genuinely has more expertise than you, it's fine to acknowledge that difference. You know this area better than I do, but I'm wondering about this specific part. That's not weakness. That's respect. You're recognizing knowledge without surrendering your perspective, but opening with, "You're probably right," as a reflexive disclaimer. That kills your credibility before your point even has a chance to breathe. Because when you start like you're already defeated, that's exactly how people will treat you. When you stop preconceding every disagreement, when you stop surrendering before you've even spoken, people finally begin to consider what you say. Not because you've suddenly become argumentative, but because you've stopped signaling doubt in your own objections. Strong disagreement gets evaluated. Weak disagreement gets dismissed. And the difference between the two? It's whether you sound like you're disagreeing because you genuinely see something others don't, or simply because you feel obligated to say something. Let's look back at the 6 phrases we've covered, I think. This might be a dumb question. Sorry to bother you. I'm no expert, but does that make sense? You're probably right, but they might seem polite, humble, or considerate, but in reality, they make you sound uncertain. And uncertainty, when spoken out loud, invites dismissal. These aren't phrases of humility. They're habits of self-sabotage. They shrink your authority word by word. And once people sense hesitation in your tone, they start listening politely, instead of respectfully. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be." Be one, the same truth applies here. Stop performing uncertainty with language. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop disclaiming your own credibility. Stop seeking validation for simply having spoken. Strength isn't loud. It isn't arrogant. It's quiet clarity, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. True confidence doesn't come from adding power to your words. It comes from removing the ones that drain it. You don't need to sound more confident. You just need to stop sounding unsure. Say what you mean. Own your thinking. Stop asking permission to deserve attention, because the moment you do, the entire room will feel it. People will stop talking over you. They'll start listening. If these 6 phrases have revealed the hidden language patterns that have been undermining your presence, take this as your sign to change them today, because the way you speak shapes how you're seen. And the moment you change your language, you begin to command your presence. Remember this: confidence isn't about what you say. It's about what you stop saying. Eliminate these 6 phrases, and watch how differently people respond when you stop sabotaging yourself with words.